What's up, guys? I'm Chad Barnes, and welcome to the channel. Here, it's all about real car talk, from simple fixes to smart driving tips and keeping your ride in top shape. If that sounds good to you, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button and make sure you watch all the way through. There's a lot of good stuff coming. Let's get
Running
to it.
gear. Braking system front brakes. Literally toy with small 240mm discs on versions with motors 1-2 liters before restyling and slightly increased 257mm on variants 0-9 with supercharger, as well as 1.4, 1.3 JTD and restyled 1.2. Structurally, both versions are identical, only the caliper bracket differs. The Abarth has the largest brakes. There are 284mm and a floating bracket. But the rear brakes are quite different. The weak versions have drums, and more powerful versions have discs. The main trouble of stock calipers in the front is wear of guides, fingers, and their souring. The resource of cylinder dusters is also small, rarely more than 150,000 kilometers. Unpleasantly, the rubber of caliper pin dusters is just very sensitive to the ingress of aggressive grease. Even with brake fluid, it is dangerous to pour them. They swell almost at once. Yes, such a problem is typical for almost all calipers, but the Italians have very delicate rubber. Rear disc brakes have the exact same souring caliper pin, and on cars before 2012 it will be hard to unscrew the bracket. But the main problem on cars with rear disc brakes is the handbrake mechanism. The caliper housing here is aluminum, and if there is dirt on it, the axle of the handbrake mechanism sours very quickly, especially if the handbrake is used rarely. Repair of the caliper turns out to be quite expensive. Drum brakes do not have such problems. Usually the main trouble is corrosion of the whole stuffing and general wear after 150,000 mileage. Leaks or other malfunctions are very rare. Part original price of non-original 2 brake system front brake pads 8461 Bosch 2650 ABS 4154 rear disc. Brake pads 5854 Bosch 1774 ABS 2916 brake disc front 257 by 22mm 9094 Roadhouse 1728 Phoenix 1519 brake drum rear 214mm 6113 Zimmermann 3151 Phoenix 970 suspension in these small cars is quite strong. It is a pity that the standard ball bearing is not replaceable, as well as silent blocks. But at least they are available in almost original version from Magneti Marelli. And the price of levers in an assembly is very gentle, about 5 to 7,000 rubles per piece. Resource even on Russian roads, 50 to 80,000 kilometers. The rear silent block usually fails first, the front one is noticeably more reliable, and the ball joint is conditionally eternal. On cars with mileage 200 plus there are still original ones. All would be good, but installation of almost original silent block for 400 rubles will require in any case works on removal of bumper, locker, and on turbocharged cars, and intercoolers. Total work will turn out to be 10 to 15,000. Against this background, the price of a penny spare part is lost, and many owners with a mileage of 50 to 100,000 will prefer to immediately change all the silents, and even the levers in the assembly. Supports of struts are rather weak, but the main complaints are heard from owners of electric 500e and American cars with automatic transmission. There the load is higher. The design of supports even slightly strengthened, but not enough. Still supports do not move much. The matter is complicated by the fact that there are no Abarth sport supports for Americans. They are suitable only for European versions. The rear suspension is quite simple. It is necessary to change shock absorbers and their bushings in time. The beam silent blocks are strong. If you did not mess up when replacing them and the springs did not sag, then almost certainly they are still original. Springs on ordinary 500s are rather soft and weak. There are variants with broken off from corrosion at mileage over 100,000. On Abarth springs are stiffer, and breakages are rare. But there the suspension itself usually runs much less, and wheel discs with hubs are already expendable, while on regular versions. The hubs are weak, but usually run above 150, and wheel discs on standard rubber are difficult to wrinkle. Part original price of non-original 2 suspension front L-arm, not available Lemfeder 2824 Phoenix 2024. Front arm rear support not available AS Metal 301 Lemfeder 392 front shock absorber 4533 Phoenix 2468 TW 2450 ball bearing 1724. Phoenix 426 Monroe 708 rear beam silent block 2469 Lemford 754 Lex 731 steering here is with electric power steering, and the simplest, with a motor on the steering column and a worm gearbox. The EPS is quite robust. With high mileage, it is recommended to renew the lubricant inside, especially in cold regions. When it loses its properties, it is felt that the force becomes more cotton-like due to friction in the gearbox. Sometimes atypical for Fiat's problem with the EPS torque and angle sensor manifests itself. This trouble is typical for mileage 150 plus and rarely appears earlier. But if the steering wheel in a turn vibrates like a vibromotor of a phone, or the force just jumps, it is to big expenses. The sensor can be searched, reconditioned sell about €50, and new Chinese cost 120, but in any case there is a risk of buying incompatible. And the assembly-disassembly of the EPS also costs something. A new EPS costs more than €1,000, which is unacceptable for most car owners. The only substitute made by General Ricambi S.P.A. is twice cheaper, but it is not clear what is the quality. Steering lugs and rods are weak. Once in 40 to 60,000, they need to be changed even in average city mode. If you drive a lot on dirt, then more often. If you drive on exceptionally good roads and carefully use the steering wheel, then less often. The rack itself is also quite reliable. Only side bushings let down, but their replacement with fluoroplastic ones is now an inexpensive operation and mastered by most services. Transmission. Common problem since the cars are front-wheel drive and very compact. There are no special complications in the construction. Everything is made with a good safety margin. There is only one problem. It is not so easy to find a car with normal ICP or normal automatic. Most likely, you will have to put up with the fact that the car has a robot. Mechanical boxes mechanics is represented by boxes of series C510, C514, and C514R. These are very compact and rather old units. The youngest in the series, the 514 box, was put with almost all atmospheric engines with a torque up to 150 Nm. It is a simple 2-shaft gearbox, usually 5-speed, but there is also a 6-speed version. Shift drive is cable operated, with not very successful rocker, and also prone to souring when idle. One of the most glaring disadvantages of the C514 is the extremely unfortunate bearings. All versions up to 2012 were equipped with ball bearings with plastic cages. Only on the most powerful motors, for this box it is 1.4, there were roller or ball bearings with a metal cage on the front or lower end of the shafts. Weak differential and tapered differential bearings with a limited resource, about 150,000 kilometers, before the appearance of backlashes complete the picture. As a result, howling of the box and characteristic dieseling is not rare. Often you can manage to replace a set of bearings on roller bearings. Good thing they are on sale. But it is not very cheap, and preventive measures are unpopular. Synchronizers are also far from ideal, but they are not 150, but rather 200,000 more. Oil leaks, unfortunately, occur regularly, and any decrease in the level is very harmful to differential lubrication and leads to seizures of satellite axles. They do not run off immediately, but increased noise in fast corners can be caused by their damage. C514R, as it is easy to guess, is a reinforced version of the usual, strictly for 16-valve engines 1.4. It is characterized by a slightly different differential and almost certainly reinforced bearings on the front end of the shafts. Otherwise, everything is the same. The same gearbox serves as the basic one for cellar-speed robots. The C5 10.5 gearbox is organized quite differently. This gearbox is still quite compact, but it holds 210 Nm of torque officially, but in fact it holds 300 plus, which is enough even for seriously Forster baths, on which it is mainly found. However, the 510 is found with both 1.4 and 0.9 engines of late editions. It's certainly more reliable than the 514, especially when it comes to handling a simple ADM. It is a pity that at the rear end of shafts here are bearings with the unfortunate plastic cage, which will inevitably fall apart over time or under high loads. Differential C5 10.5 copes well with relatively weak motors, but the torque from forced up to 180 to 190 forces of engines is poorly tolerated. However, there are many kits on this box, eliminating this problem, because C510 is often found on Alfa Romeo 156 with motors 1.8-2.0 and is very popular in tuning. What is convenient, Instead of C514, such a box is almost bolt-on, and costs the same amount, if not less. Clutch and flywheels on all versions do not cause unnecessary troubles. To minuses, it is necessary to refer except that resource. On cars with motors 1, 2, it is often less than 60,000, which is not much by modern standards. Automatic boxes if you're unlucky enough to have a Fiat 500 with an automatic. A robot, to be precise. It is here almost like Racing Graziano, but from Magneti Marelli, and it is called Celespeed CAC 328 or Geologic, depending on the market. Only the owners of American cars, which are rare in our region, are lucky, because there is a full-fledged automatic Aisin F21-250, a junior version of the familiar TF80SC. The basis of robots, as it was already mentioned above, is mechanics of Series C514 are under clutch 200 mm on cars with atmospheric. Motors 1, 2-1, 4, and C5 10.5 and above. The clutch actuator is hydraulic, and so is the gearshift actuator. Synchronizers are reinforced in comparison with the automatic transmission. The last version of the robot turned out to be quite reliable and even quite convenient in everyday use. But with robots with 2 clutches or classic automatic, on convenience of use this box cannot be compared. Not only the box is very simply, if not to say primitive, organized, but also the oil is poorly selected. To tell a car CS speed at minus temperatures simply does not work. If the oil is old, then at 0 it thickens so much that the pump can fail. Nothing prevents the use of oils with better low temperature characteristics, but experiments are made only by residents of Siberia, where Tutela freezes in winter so that the robot works only after an hour of warming up. The others just regularly change Italian oil and try to drive less in winter. With all primitiveness of the robot with 1 clutch, such boxes have enough weak points and potential breakdowns. The hydraulic accumulator gradually ages, and if you do not change it in time, you can get a breakdown of the oil pump. The price of a new one is 6,000 to 9,000 rubles, restored, and even less. And if the oil pump triggers too often, it is better to conduct a test and replace as necessary. The clutch serves long enough, if the car is operated in a flat area and everything is serviceable. But this is not always the case, and many owners do not understand the specifics of operating the robot on such a weak motor, allowing a mode with long starts, in which the clutch wears out faster. The hydraulics of the gearboxes are powerful enough, which seems to be good, but the clutch release fork and the gearshift mechanism. And at the same time the synchronizers wear out very noticeably in urban operation. On turbocharged 1.4 owners simply use the transmission as a semi-automatic, dropping the throttle and shifting gears manually, to reduce shocks and avoid the fastest possible shifts under traction. If you're lucky, you won't learn how to change the oil seals in the box, how to drill out the drain, where the oil goes, where to look for leaks, and why the clutch valve fits from the Cherry QQ. But I will still briefly describe the order of actions, if the inscription "check the box" has lit up on the dashboard. This is a very likely scenario for those who have a car mileage of more than 50,000 kilometers. And it can be repeated once or twice a year, if you are not concerned about the repair of everything and at once in advance. To begin with, check the fluid level in the working tank of the box. If you can see a leak from under the speed selection sensor, it means that the cuffs have flowed. It is useless to change the sensor gasket. If the oil level is good, measure the pump response interval. With the engine running, listen for the amount of time that elapses between actuations. 2 minutes or more is ideal. More than a minute is a good result. There is no pressure leak in the box and the pump is fine, but the problem is somewhere else. Less than 30 seconds, you should only go to the service. You have a pressure problem, and the check is almost certainly because of it. If the pump operates every 10 seconds or runs constantly, then, if you don't want to destroy it, take the car to service on a tow truck. Also, the pump may not work at all. The reasons are also quite a lot, from banal wear of brushes or wedge to problems with wiring or fuse burnout. A number of troubles can be easily eliminated, but it may be necessary to replace the pump as a whole. There are usually 3 causes of pressure leaks that cause the pump to constantly prime. The first is wear of the accumulator. The second is a worn clutch valve, from €50 in China to 400 in our stock. The last problem is noticeable by the increased flow of fluid into the tank through the return tube. The tank must be clean to see this. Well, and the third option, the most unpleasant, it is the wear of the internal collars of the hydraulic unit on the pistons of gearshift and clutch. Cuffs cost pennies, but not everyone can rebuild the hydraulic block itself. Error due to clutch calibration can be related to both clutch wear and clutch rod wear with 50,000+ kilometers. The rod is successfully welded in the service to the standard 75 millimeters, and a reinforcing crown is placed on it. Another typical problem of the robot occurs with the gear selection lock mechanism. If there is a minimum of condensate emulsion in the channel, it freezes, and the lock ring freezes to the wall. However, on just old oil, the ring already freezes and causes errors. In addition to all of the above, there is a rich choice of failures on the wiring. It is southern, quite fragile, with leaky connectors. And it does not like oil either. In general, the list of checks is rather voluminous, repair is expensive, and there are no second-hand complete boxes here, as on Japanese. Finally, a little bit about rich life. If you want to just put a new one, the Hydro block will cost €2,700, the block of executors, $1,000, the block of valves, $1,300. And a little more, for wiring and tank with tubes and clutch, fork and hydraulic accumulator. The complete box costs under $5,000. There is no sense to tell about the Aisin automatic. Even with American 1.4T with 135 horsepower it copes playfully, not to mention the atmospheric version with 101 horsepower. However, the automatic transmission is sensitive to oil cleanliness, and at high mileage it is necessary to follow it, because wear of linings of GDT lock leads to oil contamination and a lot of unpleasant consequences both for the hydraulic block and for the mechanical part of the box. You can read about the nuances of the design in reviews, say, Volvo S62 or XC60. The design as a whole is not faulty, does not like overheating and two active drivers. If these conditions are not met, breakdowns are possible, approximately like in the Volkswagen TF60 SC motors. Common problems. I think it's enough to look at the car to realize that there's not much room under the hood. For the turbo motors, they even had to put a different front fascia and bumper to accommodate the new radiators and intercoolers. Combined with the traditionally not the best quality rubber products and the robot hydraulics on most cars, all of this makes maintenance not quite trivial. It is better not to get involved at random. You need to know what and from where to remove, check and unscrew, and what connections. Better not to touch, so as not to buy new pipes and seals later. However, cars with atmospheric engines and MKP do not experience special problems, especially 8-valve ones with very compact cylinder heads and air filter in the engine cover. Gasoline motors. The main mass of cars is equipped with motors of the Fiat series. These are 8-valve 1.2 and 16-valve 1.4, and even turbo motors of a bath. It is not particularly interesting to tell about simple versions. They're usual workhorses, strong and simple, very reliable, and quite resourceful on light cars. You can read more about them in reviews. Fiat Albea Grande Punto. At highway operation the motors eat oil a little bit, because the revolutions are high already at 100 km per hour, and on 16-valve motors the oil separator is unsuccessfully arranged. But this trouble is well helped by a sports oil washer on the spigot. More from minuses. The original timing belt does not go more than 60,000, catalytic converters do not last long, throttles and lambdas are not very successful, at mileage up to 150 can already start to fool. But the motors are simple. The 8-valve ones do not bend valves when the timing breaks, components are inexpensive, the design is polished. For many years of production. On Abarths and American 500s there are also motors of the same Fiat series, but under the Multi-Air brand. They are based on the old 1.4 engine cylinder block, but the cylinder head is completely new. Chances to meet them in Russia are minimal, but the idea itself is so interesting that it is worth telling. Moreover, the same technology is used on 0.9 motors, which are still on sale. The exhaust camshaft on the motors is completely conventional and controls the exhaust valves. But, in addition to the valve control cams, it has multi-air hydraulic cylinder cams. Their profile is very full and provides a lot of energy to control the valve. The cam pressurizes a large hydraulic cylinder that communicates with the valve actuator hydraulic cylinder, opening it. More specifically, two valves with separate hydraulic cylinders. So far, it is nothing new. This is how any hydro compensator in the engine works. But the Italians have made a pump hydraulic cylinder of a larger volume than that of the valve drive cylinder. And between them they have placed an electrovalve, which allows to regulate the volume of oil coming to the valve drive. And consequently, to regulate the height of its lifting. It remains to add a system that allows you to set the optimal time and duration of opening of the electrovalve for each cycle, and The Italians have a timing system in which you can electronically control the height and speed of valve opening. As long as the cam on the camshaft is pumping oil, you can even open-close the valve several times, hold it with a small opening angle. Or a maximum opening angle, open sooner or later. This is still not complete freedom, but a very wide range of options, allowing you to increase power or maximize economy if desired. As with BMW's Vano systems, there is no need for a throttle, pumping losses are minimized, but here the valve opening speed is also decoupled from the valve stroke. The hydraulics not only allow you to limit the maximum lift height, but also set a completely new arbitrary opening curve within the maximum operating curve of the cam. In theory, all this makes it possible to make an atmospheric motor with almost perfect VSH, with exemplary filling at any RPM, to vary the degree of twisting of the mixture in the cylinder by RPM, to easily adjust all resonance phenomena at the inlet and much more. And in combination with turbocharging and direct injection provides almost ideal opportunities for boosting and reducing fuel consumption, while meeting even stringent emission standards. And the design is not too complicated. There is only one disadvantage: high oil pumping losses, and at low speeds they do not decrease at all, because the supply from the hydraulic pump cylinder is constant. The motor turned out to be not to say a failure, but far from being as hardy as the usual Fire brothers. At least not from the first time it was possible to select the stiffness of the springs for the pump cylinder, so that over time the spring sagged, and at high speeds the rocker popped off, damaging the shaft and rod. Oil squeezed through the recesses in a multi-air cover and gnawed out channels in the aluminum plate. And the valve itself after 50,000 kilometers is already malfunctioning. As a result, there is a decrease in power and increase in noise. Resource largely depends on the oil purity, and it in turn depends on the filter used, bypass valve operation, load on cold and the condition of the internal filter of multi-air block, which, by the way, is usually extremely complicated to change. Because the damage is usually complex, simply repairing the faulty components may not help, and it is better to replace the unit with a new one. And it is even better to change engine oil more often, not to bring it even to 250 motor hours, that is about 7,000 kilometers, and to use only branded oil filter. With some luck, the system works well by the mileage of 150,000. In Russia, the Fiat 500 is more likely to encounter this system if you buy a car with a 0.9-litre twin-air two-cylinder motor. This motor nominally belongs to the same series as motors 1, 4, and 1, 2, but in fact has nothing in common with them at all. There is a completely new cylinder block, a different dimension of the piston group, 2 cylinders, timing drive by chain, and there is a balancer shaft in the block. But the block multi-air of the second generation is significantly more reliable than on motors 1, 4, and simpler in design and thrust. Of the supercharged motor is very good. Its 140 Newton meters it gives out already after 2,000 revolutions. It is a pity only, at idling the moment is quite small and uneven, so that when starting the engine it is necessary to twist appreciably. What with reliability, it is not clear yet, but there are no mass problems at mileage up to 100,000. Part original price of non-original price of original 2 detail radiator, not available Magneti Marelli 4341 Nissan's 8252 timing. Belt 1 416 V4 149 Dayco 838 Gates 1015 timing belt set 5005 Senior 2804 ENA 4808, with pump, timing actuator 0 964 890 not available. Pump 1 0121 45640 Hapu 2444 Magneti Marelli 1296 diesel engines turbo diesel 1, 3 JTD is more familiar to us from Opel models. With it were delivered to us the following models: Corsa Astra, not the best motor in terms of reliability, but very economical and tractive. It makes sense to see the details in reviews of these Opels. If it is a modification with a manual and a simple atmospheric fire, the car can potentially drive at least 500,000 kilometers. Unless it rots before, corrosion problems are described in detail in the Part 1. The robot, perhaps, is not too justified. The high cost of operation is not compensated by driving sensations, and even on the contrary. The question of rationality of exploitation of this southern and not very liquid machine in northern climate remains actual, but Fiat 500 is usually bought for love. And where there is love, there is no place for rationality. In conclusion, the Fiat 500 offers a unique blend of charm and character, making it a delightful choice for those who appreciate its distinctive atmospherics. However, potential buyers should be aware of the numerous challenges that come with its robotic transmission. While the driving experience can be enjoyable, the issues associated with the robot can lead to frustration and costly repairs. Ultimately, it's essential to weigh the joy of owning such an iconic vehicle against the practicalities of its maintenance. For those who can navigate these complexities, the Fiat 500 remains a stylish and fun option on the road.